everyone. That fabulous music was a combination of three tunes, Mendocino Cure, Yakima Rim, and Play with Alacrity. The band is Roguery. The musicians are Anita Anderson, Shira Common, Jim Oakton, and our guest tonight, Dave Bartley. They are dances that are choreographed by our friends Brooke Friendly and Chris Sackett. And we are posting what albums they are on and where you can buy them. I am Darlene Hamilton, and we are the Historical Tea and Dance Society. On our team, we have Lindsay Verbal assisting with the program, handling media and attendee questions. And we have Reed Wilson monitoring Zoom for questions and posting all sorts of fun things in the chat, things you need to know. And Larry Hansen is monitoring Facebook live chat for questions and posting there. As if you've been with us before, you know we always talk about how important that chat is because lots of fun commentary goes on in that chat, and we post a lot of information about the tunes that you've heard or things that our guests are talking about. So please make sure you know how to find it and grab things out of it, because at the end of this show, we will be posting the After Talk link, and that's where we get more personal and one-to-one with Dave. And you're going to want to be able to grab that link as well. If you have questions, please post them in the chat, because we will be taking them, picking them up, and then asking them either here in this web chat, maybe not, but definitely in the After Talk. So definitely join us for that. Thank you to Karen Axelrod and friends for that wonderful concert every single week. Thank you so much. Thank you. We love our musicians. Let me go into a biography on Dave Bartley. He plays guitar, mandolin, sitar, and many other plucked strings instruments. He plays English country dance music with Roguery, with Shira Common, Jim Oakton, and Anita Anderson, and Tricky Brits, aka Bag of Tricks, Anita Anderson, Betsy Cooper, and Sandy Gillette. He is in the Contra dance bands KGB and Contra Sutra, and used to be in the performance group None Such English Country Dancers. Dave also plays everything from French cafe music to Viennese waltz and more, with a wide range of other bands. The CDs Dave has played could fill up a bookshelf. These include 7 albums with Roguery, 6 impropriety CDs for the dances by Friendly and Sackett, and also Minding the Gap. Add to that 4 CDs plus a digital album with KGB, a CD from Bag of Tricks, and a heap more recorded with other musicians, and you can listen to Dave all day long. Dave has composed over 300 dance tunes. Many of them are used for, as we've mentioned, the dances of Friendly and Sackett, such as Cottonwood, Love Always, and Ruby Crown Kinglet, which you will hear a little bit more about later on in this program. Dave has toured the US, Canada, England, Greece, Australia, playing for dances, concerts, and festivals, and teaching workshops. If you didn't know him before, just like all of us, you will get to love him during this talk. Please welcome Dave Bartley. We're so happy to have him on.
Hi there.
Hi.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Darlene. Thank you, Lindsay, and Reed and Larry.
And Kat.
And the cat.
Thank you. All right, let's jump right in, okay?
Yes.
Thing number 1, variety.
Yeah. So I live in Seattle, Washington, and I was actually born here and raised here, so the variety does not apply to my place of residence. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about myself in this thing. So I am the youngest of 5 children. I had 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters. My parents were not musicians per se, but we listened to a lot of music at home and quite a wide variety of things. I grew up in the 60s and 70s a bit, and we listened to, Dave Brubeck, Harry Belafonte, the Limelighters, the Sons of the Pioneers, Clancy Brothers and Tommy Makem, and musicals and big band and classical. And so I heard a lot of different things growing up. And also because my siblings were older than I was, they were listening to the popular music of their time. So when I was very young, that would have been the Kingston Trio, and then it became the Beatles and the Byrds and the Yardbirds, a favorite of mine. And then they listened to blues, and then they listened to folk music like Ian and Sylvia and Gordon Lightfoot and So I was hearing a lot of different things growing up. Both my sisters played flute in school, um, but not that much outside of that. Both of my brothers played guitar. And it was kind of an expectation in our family that around the fourth grade you would take up an instrument, and there was a form you filled out in elementary school. And I actually originally put clarinet down, and then I put flute down, and this is actually a true story. One of the neighbor kids said, "Oh, you should play drums. They're easy." So I thought, okay, I'm going to play drums. So I signed up for snare drum, and that's what I did basically through all of my public school. I started on snare drum, switched to timpani later, and played other things, glockenspiel, and all of that at school. But around sixth grade, I picked up guitar, and why I did exactly is a little obscured in history, but maybe had to do with my brothers playing. I'm not sure. Both of them played in rock bands in the 60s, and my oldest brother's band actually practiced in my parents' basement, so I heard them quite a lot. And my brother actually played bass in that band, but they played the music of the time, again, the Byrds, the Beatles, and so on. And sometime later, my other brother played in a band that actually had brass in it. It was kind of the time of Blood, Sweat, and Tears and Chicago and so on. And so I was around a lot of music, and my ambition was to be a drummer in a rock band, a famous rock band. And but then once I started playing guitar, that kind of changed a bit. And I think my mother was actually kind of grateful. I don't think she really wanted to have somebody playing drums around the house all the time. So anyway, my next older brother sort of taught me my first dozen chords on guitar. And from there, I was pretty much self-taught. Every once in a while, he would give me another little thing. Like I remember learning finger picking, what they call Travis picking or claw picking. It was kind of this standard thing that like Paul Simon would do on the Boxer or whatever. And he also taught me my first playing blues pentatonic scale lead guitar. And so I was playing in rock bands and playing a little bit of folk music as well. Kind of everybody in the family learned a whole bunch of Gordon Lightfoot songs. I think my brother knew 60 or 70 of them at one point, and I probably knew 30. I've pretty much forgotten all of them by now. So I played with friends. We jammed and we did that. And my first entry into being in a kind of a serious rock band was in my beginning of my senior year in high school. A classmate of mine invited me to join this group called Aries. And there we are in all our teenage glory. I was all of 16 at that point. And I'll let Lindsay highlight which one is me if you haven't figured it out already. Yep. Wasn't able to grow a beard yet. So we played for about a year, and then that band broke up when we graduated from high school, and I ended up joining another group for a while that actually played. We were both booked by this booking agency that was hooked up with a lot of the rural high schools in Washington State. And we would play high school dances, some junior high fraternity sorority dances, and we would play pretty much every Friday and Saturday night. It was like as soon as we got out of school on Friday, we'd go load equipment in the van and go driving off to some small town, 3 hours away, and set up at this high school and play a dance and then do the same thing on Saturday. And the second group I was in did more or less the same thing, except we actually played a little bit of disco and funk and some other things as well. So it was things like Casey and the Sunshine Band and Earth, Wind and Fire, as well as Yes, and also the sort of the top 40 hits of the day. And then I played in another band for a while, and then with a friend of mine, we put together this group called Mantis. And we were the lead singer was really into Aerosmith and Led Zeppelin, so we did a lot of that. But also, we were way into Yes and Genesis and Jethro Tull and all the progressive rock groups. So there was this constant sort of pull between playing the top 40 things that people would want to dance to, and then the more sophisticated things that we were listening to on our own. This group also did some other odd things. We actually played stuff by the Sex Pistols, and actually got to destroy a guitar once. It was fun. It was just this $20 Sears Silvertone or something, and anyway, that was a fun experience. So just a lot of stories from that time. But eventually, we started playing our own material, and then nobody really wanted to hear that. So we didn't have hardly any gigs, and so the group kind of faded out. And by that time, in the parallel, I'd gone to college and got an electrical engineering degree, and then ended up getting a job as ultimately a software engineer. And luckily, through my work, I managed to take a 9-month trip to Europe, where I worked about half the time, and was just able to tour around. And while I was there, I bought a classical guitar. And one thing was, in my early teen years, there was a classical guitar and a method book sitting around the house, and I started just reading through it on the side. And so I'd been playing classical guitar for a while, and I'd learned some kind of basic repertoire pieces and was doing that in parallel with all this electric guitar stuff. And so in Spain, I actually bought a fairly nice guitar and then traveled around. And I think Lindsay's got a picture of when I was in Greece, and I met two guys on the boat, and we would play like bluegrass things. We would do like Foggy Mountain Breakdown, and then we'd play Goodnight Irene and sing. And then maybe I'd play something on the classical guitar, and we were busking a little bit in Greece, and it was kind of a, I don't know, out of body experience. It was a lot of fun. And so time went by, and I wasn't playing rock music anymore, but I did start doing some multi-tracking. I had a friend who had a 16-track recorder, and he was a singer-songwriter, and I was starting to do kind of singer-songwritery things. But also, since I played drums and I could play bass a bit, and I could at least sort of play keyboards, and so I was doing these things and sort of sing. That's a matter of opinion. I eventually decided I didn't like my singing voice that much, so became mostly a backup singer. But anyway, I was recording stuff, and I was at work. It turns out I had a fellow engineer who played fiddle and a bunch of other instruments, and he was involved in the Balkan music scene, Bulgarian, Macedonian, Greek stuff, and also was playing fiddle tunes. And he said, "Why don't you bring a guitar to work and we'll jam at lunchtime?" And so we started doing that, and we played kind of these combinations of, we would play a Macedonian lesnoto, and then we would play, an old-time tune like Cluck Old Hen or whatever. And in fact, although my brother had played bluegrass mandolin in the 70s, my next older brother, I really got my start playing mandolin in an Italian folk band with him. His girlfriend played guitar, so they didn't need another guitar player. So he loaned me a mandolin, and I kind of learned how to play the Neapolitan tarantella and some other stuff. We actually played a couple of gigs. The weirdest thing from that was we did an Italian brass band tune, so I learned how to play 4 notes on trombone. And learned that if you play a bad note and start laughing, it's all over. You can't play trombone anymore after that. But yeah, I think I could play E flat, B flat, F, and A flat on trombone. But anyway, so he also played in a group called the Carpathian Ridge Runners that did literally fusion of Balkan and sort of Celtic Appalachian tunes. So we would play a tune like Cluck Old Hen as a 9/8 Bulgarian Daichevo, or anyway, it was this odd thing, so we did some of that as well. And he invited me to play in this band that had a single gig coming up. It was kind of an informal Balkan/international group, and they needed a bass player. So I actually borrowed an electric bass from my housemate who had the 16-track recorder. And it happened there was this accordion player in the group named Mary. And well, she's actually sitting just off screen, so we're going to have our 30th wedding anniversary later this year. And that was a real major, you know how some things are just major inflection points in your life, and musically and in many other ways, that was one of mine. And our first date was actually going to a contra dance, which is not always the best strategy for starting a relationship, but it worked out in this case. It turned out I knew a couple of people there, and I had when I was growing up, my family went to a YMCA family camp, and we had square dancing on Wednesday night during this a week-long camp. And so we did 2 square dances every time. The second one was Rockin' on Rosalie's Boat. I still remember that. It had a grand square in it, so I've known how to do a grand square forever. And then they did like pata pata, some like line dances. So I knew like Alamand and swing, well, sort of. And then I'd gone to a contra dance before we met and had a great time. Didn't go back, just I don't know why, but just hadn't become a habit. Anyway, but so Mary and I went to a contra dance. I had a really fun time, and we started dating, and she was dancing in this English performance group called the Nonesuch English Country Dancers that a friend of hers named Jennifer Spiegel had started. And so I'm the one with the hat on and the yellow tie, and actually Jennifer is sitting on my left, to your right, and she was the one who started the group. She now lives in England. So Nonesuch performed dances, and this was my first exposure to English country dance. I'd never heard of it. I'd never gone social English dancing. And here I was learning, Dargison and Morpeth Rant and Round Pond and actually a dance called the Prime Minister, which I think is a bush dance possibly. It's a ceilidh dance anyway for 9 people where the person in the middle wears a hat, and that's actually the hat I'm wearing in the picture. And there we are, the sweet couple, only known each other for a few months then. So in Nonesuch, they used live music for their performances. And one of the people, you don't need to go back in the picture, but one of the people in that picture who wasn't wearing a Nonesuch costume was a fiddle player named Sean Hubbard. And she played in a band called Scotsbroom that dated back to the 80s, earlier 80s, and ran one of the dances in Seattle. And I'll say, at that time, Seattle had 3 contra dances a week. And in addition to, I think, 3 English dances a month. And there was an open band, open contra dance on Mondays. There was then a dance on Thursdays. That was kind of the big dance. That was the one that was Mary's and my first date. And then on Saturdays, various bands owned each Saturday. And Scotsbroom owned the first Saturday dance. And it was, in fact, half English. The first half was English, then there was a break, and then after the break it was contra. So it turned out their guitar and mandolin player had decided to leave to pursue other instruments. So Sean invited me to join. And so that was my first English and my first contra dance band. And they had a piano player who played every other month, a woman named Julie King. And when she was playing, I played mandolin, and when she wasn't, I played guitar. But 2 other members of the band at that time, and their membership changed over the years. Sean was the one person who was with it throughout. But when I was in it, they had another fiddle player, a guy named Mike Richardson, who actually was multi-instrumentalist and a caller and also a dance composer. I think some of his contra dances are done really often. There's one called Monday Night in Ballard, another called Star Trek. And there's an English dance called Bob's Boomerang that is actually on Minding the Gap that he composed for another caller from England who now lives in Seattle named Bob Archer. And he'll get mentioned again at some point. In fact, he's in a picture. I might try to remember to point him out or in a video much later in this. It's a picture later in this hour. So Mike Richardson and also a melodeon player named Phil Katz were really my two primary mentors in learning. Yes. So I joined Scottsbroom in 1990. And Mary and I met in 1989. And so I played with Scottsbroom for probably, I think, 2 or 3 years. And Julie also played with this fiddle player named Claude Ginsberg. And I remember at the Northwest Folklife Festival, which I will talk about in a moment, Claude approached me, and this was in 1992, and said, would you be interested in joining Julie and me to record a cassette of contradance music? And I said, I love to, except that Mary and I are leaving town for a year in August, so we can't. We were quitting our jobs and taking a trip around the US and Canada for a year. And so I said, well, when we get back, let's do something. And so in August of 1993, I ended up, it was KGB's first gig. And we'll talk about KGB a little bit later. But at this point, one of the things I want to mention is to talk about it a little more is the Northwest Folklife Festival. And also the Northwest Festival, the American Festival of Fiddle Tunes. I see them as kind of the twin pillars of fiddle tune folk music in the Pacific Northwest. And it's one of the reasons why I think Seattle has been for a long time a hotbed of traditional music. The Northwest Folklife Festival started in 1970, and it is the largest free folk festival in the country. I think on the order of 150 to 200,000 people go. This is, of course, in the before times. And the number of performers is in the thousands. I think it may be around 5,000 or 6,000. And that includes, dance troupes and bands, and and there's a film festival associated with it, and there's an art exhibit, but mainly a lot of it's music performance. There's also storytelling, and there's a dance floor that's set up beforehand with a capacity for maybe 500 or 600 dancers. And it runs from noon on Friday through Monday evening, starting around 10 or 11 in the morning and then going until 11 o'clock at night. And there's a lot of contra dance. There's squares, there's Cajun and Zydeco and swing and English country dance. And there are some separate dance spaces where there's Balkan and Scandinavian, and you can hear all sorts of music there. I've heard Cambodian court music. I've heard, African Umbira duets. And in fact, when I try to go hear something I've never heard before or see something I've never seen before, because there's so much there. But it's one of the places where people really get exposed to all this stuff. And then the American Festival of Fiddle Tunes has, and I should mention, so my brother played mandolin as well guitar. This is my brother John, and he played in a bluegrass group in the 70s, and they played at the first 3 or 4 folklife festivals. And then starting in 1988, I started playing every year at the Folklife Festival. So he came back and his band played for the 25th anniversary of Folklife, which I guess would have been in 2005. Sorry, no, 1995. And he and I ended up signing up for a slot as a duo. And so here we're playing a mandolin duet of something, maybe some of my early compositions. I can't remember. So, at any rate, I guess that's probably about as much background as I'll give now. If you have questions, you can let me know and I will answer them. But I'll talk later about the bands that I've played in, so keep that in mind. But I want to talk about wide variety. I mean, I guess maybe you get a sense of, I've heard a lot of different kinds of music. I ended up playing in parallel, although I'm not actively doing it now. I played in a number of international Balkan and Greek bands. And I did learn to play, Bulgarian tambura and Croatian bratshin prim and a little bit of Greek bouzouki and a very little bit of oud, Persian oud, and I have a few other oddball instruments downstairs, I suppose, too. But mostly I play guitar and mandolin and cittern, and I find cittern stands in for a lot of other things. So variety is one of the things that drew me to English country dance, really. There's such a variety of moods, from Miss de Jersey's Memorial to something like The Physical Snob, or some of the Kaylee and rants and hop steps, and it can go from very serious to very silly. And also, it spans so many periods. There are really medieval tunes. Something like Gathering Peace Gods, I think, is probably dates back to the Middle Ages. And there's quite a bit of Baroque. Some things explicitly are by Purcell, but there's a lot of anonymous things from that period that were published in the Playford books and so on. And then there are more modern pieces. I mean, there was a little bit of an inflorescence in the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 30s. And now in modern times, there's all sorts of new stuff being written, new dances composed, new tunes composed. And so there's such a rich variety just within the tunes themselves. But of course, I'm not that content to stop there, but I also like to inject a little further variety, especially since I've played a lot of different styles of music. And I remember, first off, I have to talk about one of the first contra dances I went to that kind of blew my mind about what the possibilities were. So I mentioned the American Festival of Fiddle Tunes. Happens in early July. The Thursday dance after Fiddle Tunes is often staff from that. And so this particular time, it was the Bay Area group, the Hillbillies from Mars, with Rodney Miller, and this djembe player, I think, from Ghana. And it was just, the music was insanely wonderful. And I realized, oh my God, this isn't just a bunch of fiddle and piano and guitar just playing one tune after another from Ireland or Scotland or Appalachia or England. They just did all sorts of stuff. And so I realized that I wanted to do this. And when Mary and I did that year-round trip, we went to the Edmonton Folk Festival. Mary's got an uncle who lives up there, and they always get tickets. And there was a band there called Edward II that basically did reggae and ska treatments of Kaylee tunes. And so they had this version of Shepherd's Hay that was just... anyway, they were crazy wonderful. And so I've fallen in love with genre smashing, and there's a couple of bands, if that sort of thing interests you, that I would draw to your attention. One of them is Brave Combo, which is a group out of Denton, Texas, with probably about 30 albums that do dance music, where they do like Oh Holy Night as a cha-cha or whatever. It's just really fun. And there was another group called Three Mustafas Three that was a bunch of rock musicians who were interested in world music and also did like Japanese country and Western with Turkish instruments. And I mean, just really fascinating stuff. They're no longer together. But anyway, we like to take English tunes, treat them in unusual ways. I think a lot of people have played the dance Smithy Hill as a lounge tune because it really wants that. But here's an example. This is KGB, who go under the name MI5 when we play English. We played Child Grove in 2009, and it started fairly normally, which is really what we do most of the time, and then it went another direction. So here's a clip of the beginning and a clip of the end. So I also am not above injecting a little humor in occasionally. And one of my favorite things to do, which I won't illustrate here, but I think other people do it as well, which is to quote melodies and other melodies. I think in particular for Jack's Maggot, I've quoted everything from the Meow Mix theme to There'll Be an Old Time and the, what was it, Miss O'Leary's Cow, and so forth. So also occasionally we've been known to use sort of unusual sound generation techniques. And this is actually from the same 2009 Seattle English Ball, MI5. I think we got Bruce on that one. That Bruce Hamilton was calling with us. I saw him at some point doing popping the champagne cork thing. So I think it's time for thing 2. I bet you thought thing 1 was the thing that would never end.
No, it was great. All right, thing 2, rhythm.
So the fact that I started as a drummer and played in rock bands, I think helped me as a dance musician, because I really feel that of all the elements of music, melody, harmony, dynamics, timbre, rhythm is the one key to dancing. And so I think like a drummer, I think when I play a lot of the time for music. And in fact, it's when I'm playing classical guitar, I sort of have to be a different musician, because then there's a lot of rubato and it kind of, the music breathes, but you can't really do that when people are dancing, unless maybe they're doing interpretive dance. But if you're dancing together, steady rhythm, propulsive rhythm is key. The other thing for figured dancing is phrasing, because people are doing the same thing together for a specific length of time. And that's true certainly of English dance, of contra dance. Not so true of the Virginia reel or Southern squares, where you've got different sets doing different things at different times. But it's I am often thinking about how the phrases of the music inform the phrases of the dance or synchronize with them. It's often said that the music will tell you what to do. And that's actually really only true of singing squares, where you say, and now swing your partner. But so it won't necessarily tell you specifically what to do, but it'll tell you when to do it, maybe, or it's good if it hints at that. And I found in my early days when I wasn't necessarily as careful about phrase, I'm not sure I am now, but anyway, I was less careful than I am now about minding my phrases and clarity. People would say, "Oh, I can't hear the beat," and what I realized is what they meant was I can't hear the phrase. And so this is kind of a short thing, fortunately, to make up for the first one. But I did want to say one of the things as a dance musician is to know which mistakes matter and which don't. And an example of a mistake that doesn't matter is a wrong note. An example of a mistake that does matter is leaving out bars and times through and beats, or unintentionally speeding up a bunch or slowing down. So it really is, rhythm is the core of it. And I guess the other thing I wanted to say in this group is, in this section, is discussing how important is the melody, because it really, I think the answer is it depends. In English dance, where specific dances have specific tunes, I think a lot of people who have danced the dances a lot have this internal connection between what's happening in the music and what's happening with the dance. And it can be a little discomforting if the melody goes away entirely. Whereas often in contra dance, especially with more sort of modern dancers, you can go a long ways away, and it can be almost like dancing to a jam band. And as long as the phrases are there, as long as there's some kind of signpost that says, we're starting a section here and it's probably B1 or whatever, then it'll work out. And so it kind of depends on the dance too. If it's a long ways dance where you've been going for a long time, people kind of get on autopilot and you can move a little further away, typically, unless it's a really difficult dance. And that's another of those principles, is the more complex the dance is, the simpler the music should be, probably, and vice versa. So I thought I'd conclude this part with a quote, which I feel doesn't completely apply to what we do, but it's appropriately humbling, I think. And that's what I have to say about that. Now, mind you, Artie Shaw was playing for swing dancers, all of whom were doing different things at the same time. Nevertheless, it's good to remember what is essential and what is peripheral. And I think let's go on to thing 3.
Thing number 3, organization.
So something I've found handy about myself is that, and I don't know that this was always true about me, but maybe because I became an engineer in my other life, and I just became kind of a list maker and somehow, maybe not obsessed, but naturally gravitate towards organizing things. And as a dance musician, especially as a musician who is, as I call myself, polybandorous, where I'm playing with, different people who have different schedules, and am playing fairly often, and also I'm retired now, but when I was working, coordinating with work and so on, I found it really saved time to organize things. And especially in the contra dance world, where there is an unlimited number of tunes. I kept notebooks of tunes, and I would organize them for reels and jigs, and in the English country dance world, bless Kate Barnes. 80 or 90% of the things that we play at English dances are in the Barnes books, and that percentage after the release of publishing a book, that gradually diminished over time. And I noticed that there was always like one tune in particular. It was like the one tune you had to just stick inside the book, so you always had it. And like book one, it was Elizabeth. And then I think book two was like Woodlands Walk, or I can't remember what was the first thing I tucked into the book. But the other thing is then I would have an accordion folder by letter of all of the, what we call the nibs tunes, the not in Barnes tunes. And that folder would gradually expand. And then at some point, I think I just realized I was getting more and more notebooks, and I was dragging them around, and especially when I was flying somewhere, they took up a lot of weight, and I would try to, minimize how much I brought with me. But eventually, I remember I saw the contra dance group Elixir, and they were using iPads, and they had music on them, so that you could see. Oh, that doesn't really show up very well on my display, but anyway, you had music notation, and you can fit as many notebooks as you want in an iPad. And in my case, I started carrying that around with me before any of the apps came out. The Barnes app is a wonderful thing, and a lot of people use it, and it works very well for them. And for me, I actually just use an app called Fourscore, and because I have scans of all these books that I've bought. But that is a great thing. I also use organization for logistics when I'm traveling. And I think we have an example of I just did an annotated template basically that I use for every time I go on tour. And so I've got a row for every day that we're gone. And on the left is kind of what happens that day. And on travel days, it'll have the flight number and confirmation code and times and where we're going and if there's a rental car and all of that. And on gig days, it'll say what we're playing and what time. And then the next column is for venue or whatever, names and addresses. And then the next column is for contact information, for especially who's organizing, but also maybe who's calling, who's running sound. When I'm traveling with a piano player, whether we're using a keyboard or if there's a piano there or whatever. And then the essential, also on the right, the overnight details. We once played, KGB was playing at a place not to be named, where somebody else had arranged all the accommodation. We got to the end of the night, and the person who was supposed to put us up never showed up, and nobody had any contact information for them. So fortunately, somebody else stepped up, but it was 11:30 at night. It wasn't like we were going to call. So I wanted to mention just a couple of small other people's organization that I haven't actually indulged in. Throughout KGB's history, Julie King has kept a notebook of everything that we've played at every dance, dating all the way back to 1993. And it's a very interesting record. And in actually Bag of Tricks and everywhere else she plays, Sandy Gillette used to write in her Barnes books for every tune, every dance that we played. And she would write the date and the color. And so you would see for something like Jack's Health, there'd be, a variety of different colors and like 12 entries. And then there were certain other dances that particular colors liked, and you would see the same color and a date and a date and a date. And some others, there'd be like one entry. And I think Brad Foster said to Sandy sometime, said, you know, when you're done with that book, could you donate it to CDSS as a record? So that was a great thing. I've never been that religious about it. And on to thing 4.
Thing number 4, chemistry.
And what I'm talking about here is not, you know, the class that you took before physics, but interpersonal chemistry. I've found, I've played in I'm not sure how many bands over the years, and some of them, the longest lived at this point is KGB. That it's now, I guess we're in our 28th year. We are, you know, the band itself is old enough to drink. And we travel well together. We get along. We don't play a huge amount. In fact, no band that I've ever played in has probably played more than, you know, maybe 20 times in a year. But, you know, we certainly don't even get close to that. But it's typical of the bands that I've been in for long periods of time. We just get along, and there hasn't been any reason to go our separate ways. I mean, there's been bands I've been in that have gotten along, and then we just kind of drifted apart because we were all busy doing other things. So I need to look at a different part of my notes. I apologize, because I forgot what was next. So another band that I've been in, actually Bag of Tricks I've been in almost as long, but a group that started in, so KGB started in 1993. In 2009, the flute and sax player Marty Rockmail formed the group Contra Sutra. The name Russell, the guy on the left, it has to be credited with the name. I'm terrible with band names. I think I've come up with a lot of clever tune names, but band names I'm hopeless. But I like the name Contra Sutra quite a lot. And one thing that's different for me in this band is I'm the backup player, and I actually don't play that cittern that I'm playing very much. I mostly play guitar in the group, but for me it's really fun being in that role. And so among the English bands that I'm in, so Tricky Brits grew out of Bag of Tricks, and we've been playing, I think, since the late 90s, and we're still playing and having a great time doing it. And then I also play in the band Roguery. And Roguery was actually an assembled band. It was Brooke Friendly and Chris Sackett they basically invited four musicians that they respected and liked to come together and play for recording a companion CD for their first album. And we've stuck together since. We've recorded 7 CDs. We have a great time together. It's we can go a whole bunch of different places musically. And so I also, the only other band I think I am a regular in is a group called Valse Cafe Orchestra that plays for ballroom dance. It's sort of a ballroom dance orchestra in the Viennese style, and I play guitar and mandolin in that group. And I was going to talk a bit about community, but I think you guys know how important the contra dance and English dance communities can be and how global they are. It's really one of the things that draws me and keeps me, I think it's one of the reasons why it's the favorite kind of gigs I have are contra and English, is the people who organize, the people who play, the people who call, the people who dance. When we travel, we're almost always being put up by, you know, just great people that it's such a delight to meet. And, you know, especially in these times of Zooming, we're seeing people from, you know, Australia and England and of course all over the US and Canada. And it's a reminder what a great community we have. And I think it's time for thing 5, which I don't think will be 11 minutes, but we shall see.
That's okay. We can go a couple minutes long. We
Oh,
don't end exactly on the hour. All right. Thing number 5, invention.
and in this case, I'm referring to tune writing, because yes, I do have a certain notoriety as a tunesmith as well as a musician. I said it was a list maker, and it's true. I have a spreadsheet in which I've listed every named fiddle tune that I've written, starting with the first one was in 1989. And I think it was a jig called Angels Rush In. Anyway, it's been buried in the sands of time. But I've cataloged since then. I have 379 entries. And then there's also a host of unnamed things and fragments, but those are the ones that I thought enough of them to give them names. And I wanted to talk a bit about how I write tunes. I have to confess, I don't consider myself very prolific, first off. I haven't written a thing in about a year, although I think I'm going to get started again. I got a couple ideas percolating. But, you know, some years I put the year down for every tune, and there's a couple years where I wrote one. And then there are years where I wrote 40. And it really depends. I'm a little unusual, I think, based on my informal polling, in that I don't write with an instrument in hand. When I was younger, I did sometimes, but since I've been writing fiddle tunes, I write them in my head. And then eventually I write them down. And one time I used music paper. I would draw 5 lines really fast. But then I learned about a language for as a human readable sort of language. Let's say it's letters and numbers for codifying music called ABC. And I started using that as a way to make my notation. And I basically just taught myself to be able to just write it down by hand when I had an idea. And I think we've got a graphic to show what ABC looks like. This is the tune Incunabula. And it's in 4/4, that's the meter. It's the key of A minor. Then you can label parts. And then all that gobbledygook after that are pitches of notes and durations, and whether also accidental signs are there and bar lines. And I think the next graphic will show you what this looks like as music. So, and then I think there's a third one that, so you can kind of map one to the other. You can see there's an E3D, and that's the first 2 notes of the first bar. It's a dotted quarter note E and then a 8th note D, and then the next thing is a C sharp. That's a quarter note, and it's the sharp is that little up arrow, and so on and so forth. Big letters are a lower octave than little letters, and you kind of get the hang of it after a while. And so that's what I've used to codify all of my tunes. Early on, I used Finale, and then I just sort of let the license lapse because I've gotten so used to using ABC. It's what, for instance, the session.org uses as their underlying platform. So one of the things that happens, one of the inspirations is just out of the blue. I call it catching the muse at work. I'm just walking somewhere and there's something going through my head and I don't know where it came from. I always worry that it was something that somebody else wrote that I heard, but then occasionally, I once wrote a waltz that was basically Portsmouth as a waltz, so I had to throw it out. But it can be hiking. I'm an avid hiker and backpacker, and so that'll happen. Maybe something driving around, being in the shower, which is an inconvenient place to write things down. But quite a number of my tunes came about that way. And as a matter of fact, the tune A Flash of Vermilion is in that category. And I think we've got a video of Roguery playing it. It's one that Brooke and Chris decided they would write a dance to. And it was inspired by a phrase that a friend of mine said, referring to the vermilion flycatcher. And the dance is appropriately named for another bird, the ruby-crowned kinglet.
Sorry about that.
No worries. We'll get to see those pictures again in a bit. So, and in fact, we'll see some of them very shortly because the next category of tunes. So, if I'm lucky, that's how tunes come to me. But also, there are some people who assign themselves like writing a tune every day. I think Larry Unger may be doing that now, which impresses the heck out of me. But one of the things I'll do is offer up a tune for auction at something like BACDS English Week, now known as Heydays, and there, or at a contra dance weekend, and it could be a waltz or something. But I've also coordinated with Brooke and Chris to offer a tune and dance to order. And this next recording is an example of that. This is called Love Always. And the tune is called Love and All That Hijaz. And it shows a little bit of my Balkan side. Yeah, and what was I going to say? Oh, yes, if this were an appendix to one of Dave Weisler's 5 things, I would point out that that was actually written in 3 different modes, and the middle mode was Hijaz. The first one was Phrygian. Anyway, so another way that I would write tunes is do self commissions. I remember one time I said, I want to write a jig in B flat. So I went out and wrote a jig in B flat. But also, another example is in Contra Sutra. I thought, we should have something that sounds kind of from the Indian subcontinent. And so I wrote a contra dance that I call the Bollywood Reel. Some of my other places that or other inspirations for tunes are sort of by necessity, what I call self commissions. An early weekend that KGB played, we worked with a caller who called a whole bunch of contra dances with balances in the B part, just a whole series of like wave balances or petronellas or. And by Sunday morning of that weekend, we were really scraping the bottom of the music barrel in terms of our repertoire. And so for the next year, I wrote all sorts of tunes with balances in the B part. And I also remember another dance weekend where we had used up all of our really nice slinky jigs. And one of the callers there said, I'm going to play this set with some really could use slinky jigs. And so I said, sure, we can do that, and wrote a couple of them before that afternoon. And so, and then also when KGB was working on its 3rd CD, we had a medley they were going to close out, and I was the one who was kind of producing. Everybody else was kind of distracted by other things in the band, so I was working on building the repertoire, and I was working at my job at the time, and I would go take I was also trying to get in shape for hiking. So at lunchtime, I'd throw on about 20 pounds in a pack and go out and walk for like 45 minutes and then have a quick lunch when I got back. And I would run tunes through my head and ideas. And we had this medley we wanted to record that started with a G minor tune called the Banshee's Wail Over the Mangle Pit. I love that name. I could never come up with one that good. And ended with a jig I'd written called In From the Cold. And in fact, if you saw Karen Axelrod's In the Moment, it was one of the things played there. And in between, we were playing an A minor Irish jig called Sean Ryan's Jig. And I've always been of the opinion that it doesn't make that much sense to record something traditional if you don't have something new to say about it. If there's lots of recordings of it already, why am I recording it again? And so I thought, I think I'm going to write another A minor jig that'll slot in there. And I named it Cottonwood because I'd been on a week-long backpack in the southern Sierra Nevada over Cottonwood Pass by Cottonwood Lakes. And so I called it Cottonwood. And this is where I talk about the difficulties of writing English dance. You can write tunes all you want, but if you don't have somebody to choreograph them, nobody's ever going to do an English dance to them, by and large. And I was fortunate in that Brooke and Chris had a dance called Rogue's Ramble, and they were looking for a 32-bar jig to go for it. And then they sort of put the word out, and somebody told me that they were, looking for jigs. So I emailed them like 3 or 4 things, I think, and one of them was the tune Point Adolphus that they ended up using, but I also sent them Cottonwood. And a month or 2 later, they said, we've got this dance to Cottonwood. I was wondering, what you thought of it. And that's basically, I think, the dance that put me on the English country dance tune writing map, because it kind of had a period of catching on, and it was done at a lot of balls. And I think we've got a recording of, in fact, the Tricky Brits doing it at the 2008 Seattle Ball. And the rest, they say, is history. I think I was trying to count, but I don't exactly know. It's somewhere between 12 and 20 dances. The tunes of mine they've turned into dances. And a number of other writers have written dances to my tunes too, which I greatly appreciate. But it's been a really productive, and for me, I'm very happy having worked with them and continuing, I hope, over in the future. So I think that's really about all I had to say about that. And I think you have a couple of questions for me.
I do. Well, I know you're also a bit of a dancer. So what's your favorite dance? Everybody always wants to know.
I'm going to throw you a curveball here. In one of those Tricky Brits pictures, the caller Bob Archer is there, and he hasn't called for a number of years. He kind of retired from calling. But so he was from England, and he ended up falling in love with somebody in Seattle, and has moved here. And but one of the dances he wrote, I remember doing it. So I'm answering a slightly different question, but it's what favorite is for me. It's the dance I'm most looking forward to doing again sometime. It's a mixer called the Magnificent Seven. And it's for 7 couples arranged sort of like an old 7-segment 8. So the couple here, couple here, couple here, couples there and there. And you go 7 times through. It's a mixer. It's really twisty to do. And it doesn't matter because it's a mixer. And you know, if you do it perfectly right, you end up with the person you started with. If not, who cares? And it's
We've
just
got several people commenting on it. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, so I love that dance because it's you know it's mentally challenging, but it doesn't really matter if you screw up. You know, I love Dutch crossing, but oh man, if you mess up, oh boy. With the Magnificent Seven, you just end up with a different sequence of partners, and it's okay.
Sounds great. I think we're going to have to try it down here in Pasadena.
You
I
know,
don't think
any
we've done
like
that one.
any 32 bar marchy thing, 7 times through works.
Great. And I always ask musicians, what's your favorite tune? Is there a tune that gives you great pleasure to
Oh,
play or listen to?
there are so many. There's especially a lot of modern tunes. I mean, I could list a whole series. I started. I wrote one down and went, oh no, but I want to write this one down. Then I write. So I mean, I started with like the Red Star Line, Kathy Tallity's tune for Autumn and Amherst. Such a great tune. Dave Weiser's Scherzo in C minor. For Mary Kay, Debbie Jackson's Richard's Reminder for Whately Barn. Several of Shira's tunes, just about any of Jonathan Jensen's tunes. I mean, the list goes on. I'm leaving some out. And again, it plays back to the fact that I love variety. I don't tend to get stuck on any one tune for very long.
Well, I can fully understand and what a body of work you've created. And I look forward to talking to you. I'm sure everybody looks forward to talking to you more in the after talk. But first, I have to go through all this end stuff that we have to
That
get through. So thank you, Dave, for being on our show. We really appreciate it. And thank you to my Five Things team, Lindsay Verbal in the background, Reed Wilson on Zoom, Larry Hansen on Facebook, along with our helpers, Kara King, Dan Vilter, and Adele Nichols. Thank you very much, all. Watch our past Five Things web chats. You can find a link on our website and on Facebook and on YouTube. We're posting that stuff now. After talks are not publicly available. However, you may request the link by emailing us. So go ahead and do so if you want to see an after talk that you missed. And a big thank you to everyone who's been sending in donations to our group. We really appreciate it. We do still have our commemorative pin, the Five Things pin. We love that. It's a lot of fun to have. We're going to post the information for that. You've heard me say it several times. Email us if you want more information. We're posting the after talk link right now. Coming up this week and beyond, next week and beyond. On Tuesday, May 4th, we're doing a special event. It's Five Things Inside the Dancing Mind of Philippe Calens. It's a memorial of his work by friends in the dance community with Allison Thompson, Barbara Greenberg, Brad Foster, Graham Christian, Paul Ross, and some other special guests, along with all of you. We're going to talk about his legacy, and we hope you will join us. We are posting information about that. And then I want to, because we don't really want to be advertising on that show. It's not the place, so not that we advertise, but coming up the week after that, we will post it, but we probably won't make a big deal about it. We are having Barbara Greenberg. So you want to sign up for our May 11th event, which is opening up early. So you can do that. And we will be doing all the regular posts and all. So we're really looking forward to having Barbara Greenberg from Hold the Mustard. We've been having a lot of musicians on as we're getting, it seems, close to the end of this pandemic. We don't normally get to talk to our musicians so much. And we really love it because we so appreciate you all. This Sunday, if you want to have some fun, join the Historical Tea and Dance Society at our 12th anniversary party, the Alice in Wonderland Tea Social. If that sort of frivolity and merriment is of interest to you, we are posting information for that. However, we're having a Teacups Tea Talk with Lisa Dodson and Terry Aiken, and a historical tea talk on the lobster quadrille. So that might interest some of you. Join us for tea time on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And you've heard about that before, probably. It's just a social hour. Sign up for our mailing list if you want to find out more. For donations, Dave recommends you donate to the Country Dance and Song Society or to the Historical Tea and Dance Society. Thank you, Dave. And our exit tune, oh, the lovely sunny day, when all our tunes tonight were composed by Dave Bartley. We are posting the information on that. The band is KGB, and we're looking forward to seeing everyone in 2 minutes in the after talk. Bye.